This interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research, however no part of the video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard, or Ed Fancher. Today is June 30th, 2009 at 1 p.m. This is an interview with Edwin Fancher in New York City, New York. He was born on August 29th, 1923 in Middletown, New York. So, you were part of a group that started the Village Voice newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really the major media outlet for the counterculture movement during the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really the voice of that generation and that movement. So what was it like to be the voice of a generation in landmark times?
It was very exciting, very demanding. We had very little money,
Mm-hmm.
and we recruited our writers from our readers. People who read the paper would come in and say, "I want to write a story. I want to be a reporter." And we would
What did it feel like to have created such an important thing that so many people used as an outlet for them?
Well, we were too busy to think about
Yeah.
that, just surviving, keeping going. But we did have a vision of an open newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
unlike the usual newspaper that is very cut and dried and is written and edited according to formula.
Right.
So we had just one rule at The Voice. We would never hire anybody who had been to journalism school. We wanted people who were writers, who
Right.
were not trained to write by a formula, but
Mm-hmm.
who would write in a fresh, subjective way, how
Yeah.
they saw a particular event.
Yeah, that's good. So is that what inspired you? Why did you think that was so important to start a new independent paper?
Well, because we started the paper at the end of the Eisenhower presidency, when things were very sort of flat and very conservative. We wanted to open up journalism. And we saw ourselves essentially as competing with the major
Mm-hmm.
newspapers in New York as a weekly newspaper that would cover cultural events and certain areas that they didn't cover at all, like off-Broadway theater. We were the first paper to really cover that, and many other cultural events,
Right.
but also political. We were a reformist paper looking to be in the tradition of reform journalism.
Mm-hmm. So what obstacles did you face when you first started The Voice?
We had no money, very
Yeah.
little money.
Big
So
obstacles.
we had to get by on very little, and we underpaid our writers terribly because we had no money to pay them. But many of them were satisfied because everybody in the cultural scene in New York City read the Village Voice
Right.
by the 1960s, so that many of them were picked up by I don't know, the New Yorker
Yeah.
or other publications, and did get their career started with
Mhm.
The Voice.
What did your family and friends say when they heard that you were starting a new newspaper?
We were crazy. My father thought I was crazy, but when we needed a loan from the bank of $10,000, he guaranteed it, so he was very helpful.
Oh, that's good. And I read that your 1980s slogan, advertising slogan, was "Some people swear by us and some swear at us." So, what's it like to have been a part of something that's so either loved or hated, or just people love it, or they?
Well, that was our way.
Yeah.
We were a free and open newspaper, and our writers felt a great deal of freedom.
Yeah.
And sometimes they disagreed with each other. Sometimes one writer would attack another writer on The Voice.
Yeah.
And we welcomed all these letters, many of which blasted the hell out of us.
What was it like to work with Norman Mailer?
Difficult. I mean, Norman was a genius, and he wrote a column in the early days of The Voice, and he attacked everybody. And then we had a problem because some of his columns, he would bring his columns in very late, like midnight, and our editors would have been working for 2 days without sleep to get the paper together, and then we'd drive out to Washington, New Jersey, 100 miles out, to the printing plant and get the paper on the presses. Well, sometimes there were typos, particularly when usually a writer brings in copy early. You get it in print, and you can proofread it. Norman never brought anything in that could be proofread except out of the printing press. So we had a big fight, and he quit the paper. Years later, many years later, he also wanted the paper to be even much more radical than it was. And many years later, he said, "You and Dan were right, and I was wrong. But I was going through a bad time in my life at that time."
What's the funniest thing or most poignant thing that you remember about starting The Voice?
Well, there were very, very often. On Fridays, we would write out the checks for the employees. And the bookkeeper would come to me and say, "Well, we had a pretty good week this week. We can post-date the checks till Monday." But sometimes she'd say we have to post-date them till Tuesday or Wednesday. And it didn't matter too much because there was a liquor store right across the street from the Voice office, and they would cash any Village Voice check, even if it was post-dated.
Yeah.
Because they knew it was going to be okay by Wednesday anyway, and I'm sure they got quite a bit of business selling wine in that way.
Okay. And that's it. Thank you very much.
That's it. Okay. So what are you going to do with this now?
We're using the video. We started a project called History Heard, as you know.